Good morning. This is Dr. Quincy Hawley, and welcome back to our Get MotiVETed University podcast. This is our step one, making the commitment to well-being podcast recording, and we're really excited to be with you all today. And again, I have Renee and Machel with us.
Hey everyone, how are you guys? Hope you're doing well on whatever morning it is that you're listening to this. Maybe it's even afternoon or evening, but I hope you're having a good time.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm really excited about today's topic because we're going to be talking about the 3 definitions of well-being. We're going to discuss personal development and also self-care. So Renee will tell you a little bit about her experiences with personal development and self-care. And I think it's a really important distinction to make between personal development and self-care. We hear these two terms sort of lumped together oftentimes, and oftentimes they're even used interchangeably. And that's actually something that I did when I was starting out talking about the subject, but I actually realized that they're really different when we're going to sort of redefine those today and tell you about our personal development and self-care routines. But with that being said, the first thing that I want to do is define well-being. And if you've been through the written and the audiobook recordings that we have for chapter 2 in step 1, then you'll realize that I have broken well-being down into 3 separate categories. The first one's going to be true well-being. The second one's going to be pseudo or false well-being. And the third is going to be poor well-being, which is the lack of either true or pseudo well-being. And the definitions that I have, I'm just going to read them off to you. Okay, so I have defined, and let me take a step back. The reason I came up with my own definitions for well-being is that I was really unhappy with the sort of Google definitions that I found. Basically, the definitions that I was finding on Google were very similar to this: the state of being happy, healthy, and prosperous. The end. And I knew within myself that true well-being has to be something at least a little bit more complex than that. So with that being said, my definition of true well-being is the intentionally created state of being happy, healthy, and prosperous as the result of combining and practicing well thought out, frequent, and deliberate personal development and self-care. Okay, so for true well-being, it's deliberately acquired and can be confidently maintained regardless of circumstances, conditions, life events, and the actions of other people. Now, pseudo well-being, on the other hand, is the coincidental state of being happy, healthy, and prosperous. So for true well-being, it's intentionally created state. And for pseudo well-being, it's a coincidentally created state of being happy, healthy, and prosperous as the result of unconscious or forced acts of personal development, self-care, and or the presence of a pleasant combination of circumstances, conditions, life events, and the actions of others. And again, poor well-being is the third category of well-being, which is the lack of either pseudo or true well-being. And before I go any further, Renee, what do you think about those different categories of well-being?
I like that you've broken them down. I think, when you first broke them down a few months ago in a format that was easily digestible for other people, I think it really helps in understanding that well-being is multidimensional and that it is not just one thing. But with the different definitions, it helps people recognize maybe where they fall on that Richter scale, right? Is maybe they, maybe you went through the classic years in high school and you were relatively successful, or college or something like that, and it seemed like things were not very difficult for you. But maybe that was that pseudo well-being, is that you didn't really have to cultivate any skills. Maybe what as a youngster we thought is just being lucky. And then you have other times in your life where it is a little bit of one or the other. So maybe you're doing something that is helping you achieve well-being, but you don't make the connection. So then you stop doing that one thing, and maybe the circumstances change, and you then change with them. So I think that understanding those definitions is really important in developing the skills and the mindset in order to cultivate and maintain true well-being, even when circumstances might be less than ideal. So, we all may experience some sort of, great loss in our life, but is it something that is going to be the catalyst to you spiraling, out of control, or spiraling, into a deep, dark place, or becoming weak, or, just sending things out of control, and that's, I feel like, when someone doesn't have true well-being. So you can experience a loss and be in a state of maybe grief even, but it's not something that is going to blow up your life.
Absolutely. And you know what? That was beautifully said. Like, all of that, I can definitely resonate. And in high school, I was successful, man. And in regards to like how I would have thought of my own life at that point. And even though I probably was doing some sort of self-care, personal development, things of that nature, it wasn't conscious and it wasn't necessarily deliberate, which is why when the going got tough for me, things fell apart. So one thing that I put here underneath pseudo well-being in the written portion of Get MotiVETed University in the chapter is that pseudo well-being can be quickly derailed by the right combination of personal and professional circumstances, conditions, and life events. In other words, difficult challenges or life struggles can quickly take the individual from an apparent state of being well to a state of poor well-being. And I believe that we see this with even celebrities and professional athletes and people who maybe have a lot of accolades and impressive titles when they fall apart.
Right.
When you find out that they're addicted to drugs or alcohol, because pseudo well-being looks oftentimes a lot like true well-being. Mm-hmm. And you don't really realize and understand that until the going gets tough and the sun goes away.
Especially in our culture. We have such a cultural definition of what success looks like.
Yes.
And, sometimes I've seen some things that have come across the media lately, and it's, these pictures of happy people, and it says, like, this is what depression looks like, right? It's that, it appears on the surface that these people are quote unquote successful and or happy, but obviously there's a disconnect. And I think that even the term happiness is the first goal. Okay. So if you are unhappy or depressed, then happiness is sort of your first goal. But I think that once you really have true well-being established, you move into deeper emotions and deeper senses of joy, gratitude, even you have this deep respect for things in a way that is, like you say, a little bit less unshakable. It's not to say that you don't still experience those things, but it's different.
It's almost like you have a mind of bliss, right? I don't know if I'll have to cut that out or not, but probably. At any rate, so I have a question for you, Renee, because I know that you tell the story of when you were in Michigan working at the practice, when you had that mental breakdown. Were you were obviously probably you weren't in a state of true well-being at that point. That's clear. But was it pseudo well-being? That people think that you were okay, and then it's like all of a sudden I have this mental breakdown? Like, what did it look like for you? Were you in poor well-being or pseudo well-being?
I would say I was on the cusp of both, in that there was no way I could help others achieve, a life of well-being for certain. But
Do you think it surprised people? Do you think it surprised them when you had that mental breakdown where you dropped down beside the desk and you kind of lost it?
I think so. So that was my first panic attack.
Panic attack. That's what I mean. Mental breakdown. Right. Are they different?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. So, but okay. So that was my first panic attack. And I think, in a degree, because it happened so long ago, maybe leading up to the moment surprised people, but knowing everything that I was going through, maybe to some degree it wasn't that surprising, because depending on where you were at in my social circle. So if you were really close to me and you knew more about me versus sort of on the outside. And I think everyone has that, you have these associates or people who, again, they just see the highlight reel of your life versus the people who truly know who you are, really know what you're going through, and that you feel really connected with. And at that time, in pseudo well-being, absolutely, there was a huge combination of circumstances that led to my demise, and in a way that I was actively trying to succeed in my life, but not acknowledging how deeply impacted I was by not only the circumstances, but by the way that I was processing and or not processing them. So one of the things, that was said to me later in my therapy was that I didn't have the coping skills. And that was like this huge light bulb that came to me, but it was not the first light bulb. I was well into seeing different professionals at this time before this one nugget of information hit me like, oh my gosh, I don't have coping skills. And here I am, 20 something, looking back at all of the stuff that I went through from the time that I was a toddler or an infant and saying, yeah, you didn't cope with that. You didn't cope with it as a teenager. You're not coping with it as a young adult. And everything that's happening now as a young adult, you're definitely not coping with very well. So I had a lot of things going on, internally, but then a lot of life circumstances that permeated those very thin boundaries. And, something that I talk about with the panic attack is that I didn't have any boundaries at all. I had zero boundaries. I had said yes to another shift after working full-time, after going to school full-time, and wanting to just, this mindset of, can you say no to your boss? How do you say no to your boss? And so that was one of the first books that I had read was Boundaries. And it was, what to say yes to and how to say no, so.
Yeah. And that's really important. And I think I still have your book here, by the way. I think you let me borrow that one. I'm pretty sure it's on my bookshelf right now, but those are some really good points that you have to set those boundaries. And thanks for sharing a little bit of your story with us. And the reason I asked that question is because for me, I was definitely that case where people didn't know like that I was drinking and driving on the way home. They didn't know that I was drinking on my off days. They didn't know that I was smoking all the time. They knew I was gaining weight because I was ripping pants in the exam room, right? I always joke and say, rest in peace to the 5 pairs of pants that I ripped when I was practicing. And I think that when I came out with my story, that it shocked a lot of people.
Right.
It shocked a lot of people because no one expected that. I had been an achiever my whole life. And I think it really kind of not makes people nervous, but I don't know. But at any rate,
for you, right?
What's that?
Concerned maybe a little bit that they care for you.
Yeah, concerned they care. And it's so crazy because I don't even think that my wife knew the full extent of where I was in terms of my struggle, because I was trying to hide so much of it that, like, how could she know? And
exactly. My dad would say to me, my dad kind of knew, I feel like he knew on a, I'm like not an intrinsic level, but just on an instinctual level.
Right.
I was struggling, but, and my work family sort of knew, but the thing about it is sometimes is that they just don't know how to help. And so I think that for sometimes people almost will tell themselves things that helps them sleep at night. You know, that maybe it's not so bad. And I think that when people realize, like, I don't share much about, we'll say, my suicidal ideations, I think that's shocking to people because they might think of anxiety or something like that being now very well known. But when you're managing anxiety and depression and having these thoughts, that's not something, especially for me, that was shared. And so just sharing that, people were surprised because it wasn't shared until I was at a place of true well-being, because I didn't feel like I could share it.
Wow. And we're not going to talk about that a ton on this episode, but I think that's a really good point, that when people are having these really challenging and just difficult thoughts, that it's you don't know that a person's having those thoughts. Oftentimes, sometimes you do because it's verbalized or it's vocalized, but oftentimes, because that was my case as well. Like, I wasn't going to a therapist, I wasn't going to a coach or anything like that. I was just kind of, I'll always explain it that you kind of think that the journey that you're on at that given point in time is normal. It's right. So I didn't even feel the need to tell anybody that, you know, I was drinking a ton. Like, it never crossed my mind that I should go to an alcoholics abuse center or something like that. It never crossed my mind because I didn't think that I was doing anything wrong. I mean, it's like, you know that drinking and driving is wrong, but you think that the drinking and the smoking is just something that people do when they turn 32. Like, that's what you do. Life's over at that point, right?
It's something people do.
Right. So it's so crazy. But anyway, like, I think that it's really cool because what we're about to get into next, I can't wait to hear some of the things that you do in terms of personal development. But I believe that this talking about our stories is a really great segue into this next section of the podcast, personal development, why it's so important, how it literally saved my life, and how I consider myself like a personal development guru. It's my thing, man. Like, I wake up at 3 a.m. to do this. Renee, you've been proud of me this morning. I was up looking at stuff, online courses, you know, I'm just developing myself. And I even considered doing some push-ups. I did not do push-ups, but I considered it. But at any rate, like, tell us a little bit about, actually, before we go there. So personal development is something that I believe every single human being should be doing. 2019 and beyond, and even 20 years ago, this is the age of personal development. If you are not doing this, if you can't easily describe to someone like what your personal development routine looks like, then I'm excited for you, because when you begin to do it, you're going to see things just improve and change. People are going to be attracted into your life, and the negative people and the negative circumstances and conditions will be pushed away from your life. I consider personal development to be a door that leads to more doors, and each of those doors leads to more doors, and each of those doors just leads to more and more and more doors. And it's like this never-ending process of trying to reach your full potential. You can never run out of personal development. And if you don't do this again, I'm really excited for you. Congratulations. And I hope that you take it seriously. With that being said, Renee, tell us a little bit about your personal development experience, what it means to you, and maybe even a few of the things that you do on a consistent basis to just stay sharp.
I'd absolutely love to share that with you guys. And I really hope that through this podcast and the courses that we can help you define your personal development routines and habits, but also help to distinguish from self-care. So self-care is not the same thing as personal development. And like you said in the beginning, sometimes they can be used interchangeably, but hopefully, we can help you guys define that a little bit clearer. So personal development being something that enhances the quality of our lives and contributes to the realization of our aspirations. It helps us to improve our awareness and our identity. And it takes place over the course of our entire life. It's not limited to self-help or self-care, in the activities that, we develop in our roles, but it takes place in a number of different contexts. So, it's and I'm going to say the development of our tools or techniques, our coping mechanisms, our habits, things that support us. And one of my biggest personal development routines or habits is research. Is research and reading. And there's a number of reasons for that, partly because you don't know what you don't know. And for me, there needs to come an understanding of a concept before I can implement it into my life. And I believe that that's the best way in order to implement it into your life in a way that is going to support you for the long term. This isn't a diet that you're just going to try without knowing how your body works or without knowing how the nutritional makeup of a food is going to affect your body. Instead, you just sort of take someone for the face value of saying that, you should do this. So it becomes a practice. That practice is constant. It's just like the practice of medicine. It's the practice of personal development. It's the practice of yoga. It's the practice of, doing the next right thing or finding your worthiness, finding your clarity, or even your sense of self, your sense of well-being, understanding, who you are. So whether that's researching and doing self-study reflection, or whether it's researching biology, psychology, nutrition, what makes up the components of a quality of life? What makes up a balanced emotions? How does the brain work? Things of those nature. And you don't have, you only have to go as deep as you want to go. But whether it's in business, your social life, your health, your spirituality, all of these things are components that make up our lives. And I think that too often we forget about them and we ignore them because it's not mainstream. Even when people are doing things that support them. So back in the day, maybe before I had a panic attack, before I was diagnosed with, stress-related ailments, I was in some ways practicing certain things that helped me feel better, but I didn't connect them to, it was almost these Band-Aids. I only used them at certain times that I felt like there was, no other option, but I didn't have a strong enough toolbox or the practice that helped me get from one day to the next. And so I believe that personal development helps us know where that middle road is, helps us know how to get back into the flow of our lives, and, isn't just so dependent on the highs and lows. Like you had mentioned with pseudo well-being, we're not so just dependent on, oh, well, the next good day will come. Instead, we're able to make that next day come sooner. And so it's through choice that we do that. And once we start doing that, like you said, that door is going to open a ton of other doors. That practice that we build up is going to support our life. And so for me, like one thing that I had done was I was going for a sleep study, and my sleep technician is now one of my best friends. He's a mentor. He's been a coachee. We've developed this relationship out of an open curiosity to what could be. And now it's like, we could call each other and say, I need some of your light, because there's something going on in our lives. Just like, maybe I call you and say, this is what's going on and I need this perspective from you. But it opens a door that people will come to you. Practices will come to you as you're seeking those things out. But without seeking those things out, or without being ready for them, that same person you could have met, or that same piece of information could have fallen on your lap and you could have disregarded it. So research is a big one. Reading books to get out of my head and to help me align with who I want to be is a practice. And that is part of my personal development routine that I do very frequently. At this point, I have so many tools in my toolbox, whether it's 20, 30, 40, 50, that every day there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 that I'm working through in a day.
Very interesting. Let me interrupt. So you mentioned books, because one thing that I've realized as I've been flying around the country, doing talks at the schools, and just having a lot of conversations with practice managers and people from different hospitals, is that everyone doesn't have this common understanding of what personal development is. And so when we start talking about books, oftentimes they want to know, like, what books? What are you reading, man? So what are 2 of your favorite books that maybe for a person just getting started with personal development, who's just making that commitment to well-being, like what are 1 or 2 books that you would recommend, and why?
That's a good question. I think it depends on their interests, but I almost want to get back to you on that.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. We can come back.
Yeah, we can come back to you on that one.
Okay.
So
tell us about a couple of those 30, 40, 50 tools that you have. And if you can, like, how much time are you spending in a day's time, like, doing this personal development? Is it taking up half your day, or do you just knock out 30 seconds here, 3 minutes there, 30 minutes here? Like, how do you do it?
I like to be flexible because my life is flexible. I like to have this stability, but also a flexibility to it. So that means that there's some days where I will spend 3 hours in the backyard, going through reflections and we'll say projections of what my aspirations are, and then there's days where I'm on the go. And so it's listening to a podcast in the car. There's days where a lot of days I try to plan about an hour in the morning, if not a half an hour, to where I am reading, I'm journaling, I'm meditating, I'm priming. I talked a little about that last episode where I'm priming those things that support me throughout the day. And whether it's the mantra or, just the practice itself of getting, on that meditation bolster, or I'm doing the yoga, I'm exercising, I'm maybe having a conversation with someone. But those things happen really frequently. Reading happens almost daily. Podcasting can happen in the cars. That's when I find it best. Sometimes I listen to podcasts when I'm at home, when I can take notes and almost disseminate the information in a different way for our audience. Or there's sometimes things that are so profound to me that I want to take those notes, and you can't quite do that in the car. But then there's times when when I'm at home, it's difficult to listen to a podcast and keep all of my attention on that itself. And I listen to podcasts that are pretty deep in nature. Generally, it takes a lot of brain power for me to be really engaged in them, and so I want to be fully present with those. So generally, 30 minutes to an hour. You could say 2 hours if I'm including exercise time. And then other days, sometimes it's 3 hours, and other days it's, maybe 20 minutes. Or there are days where it's not quite a structured personal development application. It's more of what's going to work in that day, right? So if we're traveling or something like that, then maybe it looks a little different. But those are just a few things. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. And you mentioned sort of podcast, and I believe that in a later step, we're going to talk about how to master your 24 hours and make them serve your personal well-being. But the audio has been really big for me personally. Mm-hmm. So listening to podcasts or listening to YouTube videos or listening to audiobooks, like you say, on Amazon's Audible app. If you don't have the Amazon Audible app, you absolutely have to get that, or some audiobook application or something. I think that Audible is probably the largest one. They have an amazing collection of books. I mean, it's almost like I feel like a kid walking in a candy shop when I go to Audible. And I counted this morning, Renee, I have 38 audiobooks that I've been through that are on my phone right now, all on well-being and prosperity and relationships and, health and just on speaking, on business, everything that we embody and want to do. I am constantly trying to develop those things for myself, but it's a great way to do what we call stacking by listening to the audio podcasts. And again, we'll get into more of that later on, where, you're simultaneously taking action and consuming knowledge at the same time. That's a great way to exercise and, travel and still be mentally and even spiritually sometimes developing yourself. And with that being said, there are three aspects to personal development. There's going to be the mind aspect, the body aspect, and the spirit, or more like the spiritual or soul aspect of personal development. And obviously the body's going to be like things where maybe it's more diet, exercise based, taking care of the temple, taking care of your vehicle of navigating and journeying through life. The mind aspect is going to be what we're talking about oftentimes with the books and the research that we're doing and sort of things of that nature. You can even throw mindfulness and meditation into that. Maybe there's a little bit of crossover with like a mindfulness meditation practice for the more spiritual aspect. And then just really getting in touch with yourself and in tune with yourself spiritually is another huge aspect. And we're not going to get too deep on that because it can get a bit complex, but it is something that I highly recommend everyone doing, just taking a spiritual journey, not talking religion or religious journey necessarily, but a spiritual journey of really getting to know who you are and at its deepest roots. So, but with that being said, how did you discover personal development? Like, you know, it's one.
I would say that through my challenges with my emotions and mental health, I had something in me that said, you know, I don't know what it is, but I know it's not this. And that is where I took off on this little ship and went out, you know, researching. And, you know, I was in therapy at the time, and so we were working on different skills. I've been to, you know, stress management workshops. Even later in my 20s, I went through an anger management program.
But you didn't know that those things were personal development necessarily.
Not at the time.
So people weren't saying like, go do personal development, and a part of personal development is anger management, stress management, etc.
Right.
Okay.
It wasn't like that. I picked up, and that is what I love about Get MotiVETed, and that is what I love about Get MotiVETed University, is that I had to pick up these little pebbles. I had to uncover every rock along the course of a decade. And I had to seek these things out because back in Detroit, Metro Michigan, 15 years ago, these things were not at your fingertips. There were no podcasts. I don't even think there were audiobooks. You had the internet, but that information, I didn't know what to, you know, really Google and put in. The therapy that I was going through was very Western. So the approaches, you know, weren't going to be a long-term solution. Instead, it was just sort of treating symptomatically individually. And I just had this gut instinct that said there's something more. So, you know, I would pick up these things along the way. My yoga practice was something that I picked up along the way. And I originally was drawn to the yoga for the physical aspect, right, for managing back pain. And like you said, those different components of mind, body, spirit. And now there's even the life wheel, which I discovered within the past couple of years. The life wheel is 8 to 12 components of our life. Like you had mentioned, relationships, business, personal, you know, intimacy, all of these different components that make up our life. But it was mind blowing for me to go, well, no wonder you're failing in this one area of your life because you've never shined a light on it. That's You've never worked for it. You know, we're taught a certain sort of skills and knowledge in education, informal education. And then we pick up whatever household habits and behaviors are around us. You know, if you look at your relationship with your spouse, chances are you're mimicking a lot of the relationships that you saw growing up in some way, shape, or form. But when you look at personal development, here's the beauty of it. Now you have a choice. As an adult, you have a choice. You have a choice to proceed the personal development, and you have a choice to pursue how it is that you want to show up in your life. You're no longer of the mindset of take it or leave it. I'm Renee Machel. You know, this is who I am, the end. It's not like that. Now it's all about navigating and creating who it is that you want to be and who it is and what it is that you want to experience in your life. And so you have to change your behaviors, mindset, skills, habits, all of those things that support you. Because then once those are in your life, and I wish people could see my lovely hand signals, but once those are in your life, you're going to come to a time period when you're not at your best. But everything that you've created around you will support you. Because that life of well-being is not just you. It radiates from you. It's set up around you, right? And it's something that you create. And so it's
almost like a force field, dude. Like, I mean, like we're other people who want that life are drawn to it. And the people who aren't going to embrace that, they're pushed away in a sense.
Like a boundary. Yeah, it's
like
a boundary.
And oftentimes they convert and they want to come with, because they see just the change, the transformation that is happening. And let me tell you this. It is impossible for an individual to commit to well-being, to commit to personal development, to commit to self-care, and take actions behind those commitments and fail at achieving transformation and a life of well-being. Like it's universal law that if you make those commitments and if you do the actions, it has to manifest as within, so without, as above, so below. And that is a statement of psychological truth, guys. And you have to understand this. And I've seen it work for people with, PhDs and DVMs and advanced degrees with big bank accounts. And I have also seen it work for people who don't have the titles. They don't have the bank balance. I've literally seen it almost work miracles in people who were depressed or addicted to this or addicted to that, and having this type of thought and that type of thought that wasn't serving them. But when they truly made that commitment, and it'll be the same for you, that things just got much better, to say the least.
Right. I think, and I just read something the other day, or somewhere along the way, it's come across into my, brain, but it was about the concept of, in death, there's birth, and that once you commit, once you birth this journey, this decision, once you make the decision, once you make a choice, then the past behaviors, life, whatever chapter it is that you are closing is no longer. So it's necessary that it be no longer. So there is no going back,
No,
there's only going forward.
No.
And yeah.
The only way to go back is if you don't care to go forward. And if you don't care to go forward, you haven't committed, you're not listening to personal development. So everything we're saying would be a moot point, basically, because you're not doing it. It's impossible to listen to Renee and I every single day, feeding you positive information of truth. And for it, if you do that every single day, I can't see how it's even possible that an individual would still not want to or not have that desire. Because if you didn't have the desire, you wouldn't show up here. You wouldn't be hearing me right now. You'd be doing something else. So if you're hearing it all the time, then you're already in process. And I'm just going to say this, since we're all veterinary professionals. I've been a veterinary professional, a practicing veterinarian, and not practicing any type of personal development. Okay. And I've also been a veterinary professional that practices personal development, early in the morning, throughout the day. And let me tell you, the experiences night and day difference between being a veterinary professional, working in a busy practice, and not practicing personal development, and then doing the same thing while practicing it. Because you are building yourself up to be able to handle any possible combination of circumstances, conditions, in life events. Yes, there were things that can still shake you, but personal development says that anything that's shaking you that doesn't take you out completely means that you're going to grow stronger from that. And personal development also tells you that there is the advantage in every disadvantage. And it teaches you how to be grateful for the tough times in life, because they are parts of your forward progress and your forward movement. So you have a completely different perspective. You have completely different vision of the things that happen in the veterinary hospital. So when an irate client comes in, I'm looking at this as a life challenge and opportunity for me to further advance in terms of my maturity, in terms of my ability to handle future circumstances that may look anything like what I am seeing at that moment, in that moment. Okay, I'm looking at it as a test almost. And difficult surgery procedures. Now, I don't say, if there's a procedure that you absolutely hate doing, I'm not saying to continue to do that necessarily, but if you're in that moment, go ahead and take something positive away from that and adjust from there if necessary, right? Adjust from there if necessary. And what does that mean?
Change your lenses.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at her on the video and she's doing something completely weird. She has her hands up to her eyes in circles. And I'm just like, what? She want me to stop talking? Is she trying to make me laugh? I don't know. But it's a really awesome experience, and the veterinary profession offered so many growth opportunities if you're being solutions oriented and not complaining about the difficulties and the hard times and the tough times, the student loan debt and the difficult cases and the difficult schedule. I stopped complaining about all those things and said, you know what? Either I'm going to take something away from it, or I'm going to be solutions oriented and try to change it. But there are no bad experiences to me anymore. And that is something that you will gain. You will absolutely gain that from personal development. And Renee, I know you probably want to chime in.
I do. I've got prayer hands. My thank you hands up. Yeah, my thank you hands up, because that is so it. You are dead on. I think that it changes who you are for the best. And so you show up a lot differently. Maybe no one quite noticed that you were in a tailspin of, poor well-being or pseudo well-being, but I can for daggone sure tell you that people noticed when you were not there, when people noticed that you were the sunshine of that day, and that when those circumstances, I have a saying that I love, and that is reality is negotiable. Reality is what you make of it, yes, because not everyone grew up at your house. Right. So when you have those different lenses on, the same situation looks and feels a lot different for 2 people, let alone 15 people. So the exact same situation is there and it's presenting. Y'all are in the same clinic, but I can tell you that when you are practicing personal development and or self-care, that you are going to experience that situation wildly different. And that is where the quality of life for the people matter. In our jobs, we focus so much on the quality of life for animals, whether it's pain management, social enrichment for cats or dogs, behavior management, their nutrition, their preventative care. So we focus so much on that, but where's the focus on your quality of life? And once you put that in to your focus, once you put those glasses on that say, I'm focused on the quality of my life and my experience and what I bring to this situation, you're either going to throw fuel on the fire with an attitude to that client and experience that situation really differently. They're going to in turn experience that situation very differently. Yep. And you know that even if you're not involved in it, when you open up that door and you can sort of feel this thick tension in a room, it's there. Okay, everyone's vibrating, with some sort of
we've all been there.
Yeah.
Like whoever you are listening to this right now, you've probably been there where someone, it could be a boss, it could be a coworker, one of the doctors, a staff member, or even a client walks through the door and you can just tell that they're radiating something that you don't want in your life or even in the building. And right. if they're going to be in the building for the day, it can just really put a damper on the entire day. And
so
but personal development though, if that happens,
can you be the person to change that? Sorry, we're both talking over each other. Sorry, guys. But yeah, can you be the person to change that? Personal development helps you do that, you know, because I've worked at a clinic, you know, it's 6:45 in the morning. The lights are literally not on. And everyone, you know, you've got your first AM staff and someone takes you aside and says, what's going on? Because it feels awkward as all get out in here. And it's 6:45 in the morning. What could possibly be, you know what? Nothing's even happened at work yet. They're bringing all this stuff from home. You know, they don't want to be there. They don't, you know, maybe they don't want to deal with something else that's going on at home, whatever the case is. But, you know, you're there, you showed up and you're ready for the day and you're choosing, these are my boundaries. Like that's, you know, that's not going to faze me. And that's where, you know, you had mentioned earlier with the irate client, that situation, when you are not well in some way, shape, or form, when you're emotionally stressed, you know, maybe you've got an elderly parent at home and you're dealing with that. Maybe you're going through a divorce. Maybe your kid's getting sucky grades at school. Who knows? Something's going on and you are just not at your best. And that's okay. We're humans. That's what we're talking about here is the human elements of what it means to be, you know, a better human. But either way, you're not firing on all cylinders. And that situation comes in and it affects you on, let's say, a scale of a 10. And this situation sends you in a panic attack, sends you crying. Someone yells at you and you cry, you break down, you lose your stuff, you yell at someone, you bite someone's head off, you know, the new trainee who's just trying to help you, you know, throw something at them. I've had doctors who threw charts at me, threw a paper chart at me. You're going to work with people, you know, that do that. So when you're practicing personal development, that situation can then still happen. But what if now it comes in at a level 2? Same situation, same humans, but it's a level 2. And it's not anything that you're actively trying to do in that moment. You know, the Tao actually says that, you know, there's action in inaction. In that moment, you know, maybe you deploy some of your tools and resources, but in that moment, at the same time, maybe you deploy nothing. Maybe just who you are and what you've developed just says, it's not really going to faze me in the same sense. And so you're able to handle it with, you know, a different level of grace or perspective and, you know,
and through
maturity
through personal
development. It's a natural byproduct. It's a natural byproduct of.
And you realize through personal development that reacting in a negative way is only going to attract back more of the stuff you don't want. And that's one of the sort of the hallmark principles of personal development. So you never stoop to another's level, realizing that it's just going to make things worse. And I would love to talk about personal development for another 24,000 hours, and I absolutely could. But I really want to touch on self-care really quickly. Self-care to me is it's a little bit different than personal development. I still sort of look at the mind, body, spirit aspects when I'm talking about self-care. And you can also look at the life will that Renee is talking about, the will of well-being, the wellness will, whatever you want to call it. But to me, you can practice personal development and not be practicing self-care and not be at your best. Okay. And the crazy thing is that a part of personal development is realizing that you need to do self-care. So you can't just wake up at 3:00 in the morning every single day and operate off of 2 hours of sleep. It'll never work. It will never work. You cannot live and function and be healthy with 2 hours of sleep. You just can't do it. I've tried and it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
He naps like a cat, you guys. He naps. I called him the other day, you know, whatever time. He naps like a cat. He'll just.
Well, here's the thing. I love life so much that I don't want to sleep. But I want to be awake
but
at
you know you
all
need
times
it, right?
because I'm literally
You know you need it.
in heaven. Yeah. So I sleep in.
Yeah.
I sleep anyway because I know I need it.
That's right. You sleep exactly because you know you need it. Your body needs it to do certain functions, you know.
So the fact that I sleep for 6 hours, that is my self-care. And I know that research says that you should sleep for 8 to 10, and I just sleep a little bit faster than most human beings.
And that's where I think, okay, there's the research, right? That's the research umbrella stuff. But I think that it's so important to find out who we are as individuals. Yes, there's all the same species of dogs, but don't tell me that a border collie and a mastiff are the same. So yes, we're all the same species, but don't tell me that you and I are the same when it comes to our sleep habits or self-care or whatever. So that is where you have to look at yourself. You have to do self-study. You have to do the personal development. I'm an introvert. I need time alone to do whatever it is that I'm going to do in order to recharge my battery so that I can be on at another time and serve in a way that matters to me.
That's a great point about the introvert versus the extrovert. If you are an introvert and you aren't giving yourself that time that you need, you are not practicing self-care. You are not doing it. And if you're an extrovert and you're staying in your room at all times of the day and you're not giving yourself that social interaction, the energy that you need to collect from other people, then you're not practicing self-care. So I can't tell one person that you need more time to yourself, or another person you need to go out and be more social. I can't tell you that if I don't know whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, because everybody's different. Renee's needs are different than mine. Mine are different than hers.
Right. And I think, so a lot of people there's a misconception of what introvert and extrovert is, thinking that, if you're charismatic and you're, on, you might meet Quincy and I at a speech that we do and think that we're extroverts when we're not.
Right.
But so it's not about your energy level or your personality type. Instead, it's about where you derive your energy from.
That's right.
So where you get recharged. Some people, they go to a party.
I need a hole. No people, no lights, just me and some headphones and, total darkness. No, I'm just kidding. But
right.
Yeah, but I understand that about myself, and that's a part of self-care. That's not necessarily developing myself. If I'm just giving myself alone time, that's not personal development necessarily. I'm not gaining a new tool. I'm not creating a new tool by just sitting and giving myself time to myself, or by sleeping for an extra couple of hours. I'm not developing necessarily. So that
you're honoring yourself.
That's right. So I'm just recharging myself, giving my body what it needs. So yeah.
You know what? Tim Ferriss, this was something as an early entrepreneur I read from Tim Ferriss, and I loved it. And he said he will cancel meetings if he doesn't sleep well, if he doesn't feel well. Okay, so Tim Ferriss, he talks very openly about his mental health and his entrepreneurial endeavors, and he's a great individual. I can't wait to meet him one day, but he will tell people, he wakes up, and so now I've adopted that. If I have a rough night of sleep, last week I had a sinus congestion starting, and I was telling Dr. Hawley that, I didn't really want to cancel anything that was on the schedule, but I really felt like I needed to. Well, lo and behold, those two people canceled from me. They too were not feeling well. So it ended up working out perfectly to where I could do a little work in bed and sleep in a little bit longer and do a little less work that day, mentally or through physical labor, so there's different things that you can do to practice both self-care and personal development. And part of that is just getting clarity on what those things are. If you don't fully understand them, seek out that clarity, seek out those definitions, and find something that means what it feels like find something that resonates with you.
And I actually have like a 3-step process in the written aspect or the written portion of chapter 2, talking about self-care and all that stuff, or whatever chapter it is in step 1, go back through that,
right.
Develop a self-care plan. And even if you don't have time to do all the things that you think you need to do for your self-care, you write them down anyway. And you do that list, because your subconscious mind, and there's a section on the subconscious mind as well, is going to help you attract and find the time and the opportunity to do all that you need to do and more. And once you get to the Master Your 24-hour section, you're gonna be like, I have plenty of time to practice my self-care. That's why I wake up at 3 in the morning. For me, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I am not necessarily doing personal development. Maybe it's a little bit of a crossover there, but I'm just taking some time to relax, to pray, to meditate, and those things can be personal development, sort of self-care a little bit, depending on how you look at it. Certain things like going for walks, and that can be personal development, a little bit of the body exercise. But oftentimes when I go for like a walk or something like that, that's kind of like self-care. I like to be outside. I'm just doing that for me. I'm not just you
get to file it wherever you want. Yeah, you get to file it wherever you want.
Yeah,
like you start where you are. Here's the thing: do one thing every day. Do one thing every day. Yeah, that's it. I mean, that you're just doing that, and then you get to choose. No one's going to tell you like, oh, well, that's personal development. You know, you get to say, no, I get to decide that it's my self-care habit.
Hey, oftentimes I say I'm just doing me. Whether it's self-care or personal development, doesn't even matter. I'm just doing Quincy. Sometimes it's developing myself. Other times I'm just chillaxing and I'm doing something so I can recharge. And
right. But you recognize that you're not chillaxing on a checking out basis, right? You're not wasting time. Instead, you're doing right. And I think that's a really important distinction that people say, oh, well, yeah, I chillax every night and I Netflix for binge watching, whatever. Right? There's a difference because you're not tuning in. You're tuning in, not turning off.
Yes, it's deliberate and with intention that I am saying I'm doing this so I can do X, Y, or Z. And personal development says that you can't just sit and watch TV all day, because that's not serving you in a developmental way. So you have to do both of them. And that is why they are both included in the true well-being definition, because you can't be living a life of true well-being unless you are deliberately and intentionally, creating a life of well-being, circumstances of well-being, manifestation of well-being, unless you are practicing personal development and self-care.
I just thought of a fun thing. So, and you're going to move through this as you move through the practices or the chapters and things like that, but define what well-being means to you. Write it down. Start with a really gross definition of what well-being means to you, and then work to redefine that or refine it, because that can still mean different things to a lot of people. Maybe it matters a ton to you to have a relationship with your parents or your stepkid or whatever. And maybe you can give a crap less about, the relationship that you have with your brother across the country, So I think it's so important to just define what that means to you and understand that if it's one thing, and maybe it's not smoking, it's not drinking.
And we're going to go in depth into how to discover what a life of well-being means to you, how to discover your dream life, the life of complete happiness that you would like for yourself in a future step. So definitely, if you're enjoying this, if you want to be a well-being master, continue to course through all of the steps, and we're going to provide you with everything. We've got to wrap this one up, because Renee and I literally could sit here and just talk about all the different things that we do, all the different things we have in our well-being toolbox, personal development toolbox, self-care toolbox. But we have to let you guys go. Please leave comments. We would love to discuss this further. Shoot us emails, do whatever. Interact in the Facebook group about the things that you do for your personal development, for your self-care, please do share these things. If you have something that works really well, it may help someone else. But with that being said, this does conclude our Get MotiVETed University podcast. Thank you, Renee, for sharing all of your wisdom with our Get MotiVETed University students. And we will see you guys on the next podcast episode.
That's right. Bye, you guys.